Okay, hello everyone. We can get started. Sounds like you can hear me all right. So this is our Wednesday evening practice group. My name is Wynn Fricke, and I'm stepping in for Shelley Graff, who normally teaches this program. They are in Michigan now with Stacy, their wife, and Stacy's mother is in hospice. So Shelley's in Michigan, and we can just send her our well wishes during this time. So, but I thought that I would continue with the book that Shelley's been focusing on, the book by Kitty Sorrow and Tani Sara, the Listening to the Heart, a contemplative journey to engaged Buddhism. So I'll work with my own themes from the first two chapters that Shelley has started with. But let's start with a 30-minute guided sit together and just get gathered. So making yourself comfortable in your chair, in your cushion. Doing a quick check-in with the mind, with the body. Just notice what's happening in the heart in this moment. And checking in with the body here seated. Noticing if there's heaviness or liveliness, settledness. And just let the awareness rest in the body. And we can let the breath relax and deepen. And check for any tightening in the area of the belly or maybe the throat, the rib cage. Encouraging the body to relax, allowing the breath to move. And let's let the awareness during this meditation be broadly based in the body. However we're feeling the body tonight. Its varying temperatures, its movements, its weight, stiffnesses. And let the awareness be a kind of listening to the body. in an uncomplicated way. You may decide to let the awareness settle onto a particular place in the body, maybe the movement of the breath, or just a place that calls your attention. So, in being mindful of the body, we're feeling the body. This is a training of gathering the mind. And as the mind begins to settle more and more, we begin to notice what this quality of mindfulness is like, this quality of being present with our embodied experience. In the moment we've been lost in thought and come back to the body, we can know the difference. And we can let this noticing of presence and absence without any judgment whatsoever. This is how we learn. And just noticing, where's the mind now? And if it's been lost, we can just come back to the body. And if the mind has sustained itself on the sensations of the body, we can appreciate the subtle joy of being present. We can feel that as a texture in the moment. The wholesome quality of being present, awake to our experience as it happens. It's important to notice this subtle pleasure, this subtle joy. Okay, please take a moment to stretch out as you need to so you're really comfortable. Well, welcome everyone. I wish I could see your faces. It's just strange just to see my own. I'm here in the house and Mark is here with me, and he may help me navigate the chat a little bit afterwards. So what I think I'll do is talk for about half an hour just about these two chapters. And yeah, we could have a little time. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat line, and I'll do my best to respond. So it's great to be with all of you here tonight. I really appreciated this book, Listening to the Heart. And I'm really moved by the sort of life, spiritual journey of Thanissaro and Kittisaro. And if you don't know, they were formerly monks at Chithurst Monastery. This is in the Ajahn Chah tradition, and Chithurst monasteries in England. And then they left together as householders. They decided to get married, and they continue to teach and all over the world. And they have both been an inspiration to me. So I'm happy to be introduced to these chapters. And I think I'll focus on two themes, themes that came up for me, or about listening. One, like, what is listening? You know, listening to the heart, what does that mean? And then the second one was serene disenchantment, which I may or may not get to tonight, so we'll see how it goes. And after hearing about their sort of life journeys, moving from the monastic life to the householder life, and, you know, just relating to the Buddhist path, I was reminded of something that the Buddha said. He said, dukkha, or suffering, dukkha ripens in two ways, either as continuing the round of rebirth or in search. So for me, you know, that means in the ripening of our suffering, when we're cornered by our suffering, we are left with either despair or search, you know, and maybe that crossroads happens a lot on the spiritual path, despair and search. And it occurs to me that search, you know, begins and ends with listening to the heart. You know, we come to know ourselves deeply. We know our bodies, we know our minds, we know what our suffering is, and then we learn what the freedom from suffering is. In the introduction by both the authors, they say, listening to the spoken words emerging from the silence connects us to the heart. The heart fathoms and meaning is found. Contemplation is the art of deep listening. It enables discovery. And then Kittisaro, you know, he before he became a monk, he led a very ambitious life, you know, with a lot of striving for success. And after getting a degree at Princeton, he was now at Oxford on a scholarship, and but still suffering. And he has this short paragraph that I was moved by. So Oxford in England, he said, I would slip out of the university and meditate in old stone churches in the English countryside where no one else was there. I'd close my eyes and listen to the ringing silence and tune into the ancient resonance echoing in the gray stones of a search for something beyond this endlessly achieving world. Something was screaming within me, stop and listen. So it was interesting. Mark asked me last night, hey, Wynn, what do you want to call your talk? And I said, just right off the top of my head, oh, how about deep listening? And then I thought, oh, no, it just sort of sounds a little weak or corny or general or something. And that it kind of occurs to me, like, why is that? And are we really taught to listen? What does it mean to really listen, whether to another person or to ourselves? And I think culturally, there's lip service, but really we're taught to assert and know our views. We're taught to distinguish ourselves, to speak clearly, and to distinguish ourselves through our voice, and sometimes distinguish ourselves over others. That feels like the grain of our culture. Yeah. So, what are we listening to? And it occurs to me also that listening to others requires the same skill as it does to listen to ourselves. To listen to ourselves, we kind of have to get out of the way, a beginner's mind, open, receptive, silencing our preconceived ideas as we move into our practice, paying attention. I remember studying once with U Tejaniya, and he rang a bell and said, "What is the effort it takes to listen to this sound?" And I realized, no, it's very little effort. It's very little effort, but what does it require? It just requires presence and interest and wakefulness. It's very soft, just being right here, alert like an animal with the whole body and mind, just receiving the sound. I think about how we can be so moved by music, just music that we love, like how we want to drop everything. We just want to hear, we just want to let it fill us. I think that can be the kind of listening that's useful. I've read this quote before, and I'm going to read it again because it's really meaningful and powerful for me. This is about listening to others, and it's by Norman Fisher, who is a Zen abbot. And he says, "To truly listen is to shed as much as possible all of your protective mechanisms, at least for the time of listening. To listen is to be willing to simply be present with what you hear without trying to figure it out or control it. To listen is to be receptive. To do that, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be aware of and accepting of your preconceptions, desires, and delusions, all that prevents you from listening. But you also have to be willing to put these preconceptions, desires, and delusions aside so that you can hear what the speaker is saying for what it is, because truly listening requires that you do this. Listening is dangerous. It might cause you to hear something you don't like, to consider its validity, and to think something you never thought before, or to feel something you never felt before, and perhaps never wanted to feel. This feeling might make something happen within you that never happened before. This is the risk of listening. But listening, however dangerous, is a necessity. If you want to stay open to life and to change, you have to listen. To listen is to accord respect. When your mind is occupied, usually unconsciously, with your own thoughts, plans, strategies, and defenses, you are not listening. And when you are not listening, you are not according respect. The speaker knows this and reacts accordingly. It's that last line that is particularly poignant for me. The speaker knows this and reacts accordingly. So I try to imagine, I realize sometimes when I'm listening, I may have an appearance of being interested, of being kind, But really, in my gut, I'm impatient and I'm maybe judging or I'm bored or I'm, a kind of world of things that could be going on in an encounter with another person. And to realize that on some level, that is felt, that is communicated. I know that myself, I'm feeling that from other people. We don't know precisely, but we just kind of get an unsettled feeling, that no, we weren't really being heard, that whatever this interaction wasn't alive with presence between the two of us. And so I really make it a practice, an effort to align more and more, like what is going on in the heart is the same as what I'm communicating in some form or other. And if it's unskillful, I can make the effort to come to a place that's skillful, or I can shift shift the conversation, not engage in this thing that isn't somehow not right for me in this moment, but to find that kind of alignment feels really really powerful, because I believe that that's where the power is. Actually, that's the force that moves the world, right? What's happening in our heart, even more than what is said in words and in actions. Yeah. So listening for understanding. And sometimes, listening for understanding is listening beneath the words. Sometimes words are muddled and there's confusion. But we can listen with our hearts. What's happening here? What is this phenomenon, this being before me? And really open our hearts, with a kind of inquiry and interest that's not just about my need, my boredom, my, whatever it is, but really showing up with that deeper question, listening for understanding. Yeah, I had a very poignant memory of, when I was a small girl, early in school, in elementary school, and there was a painful interaction I had with some girlfriends, and I remember going home and feeling quite overwhelmed by the hurt, like it was a new feeling, like to be something so painful that it overwhelmed, like I couldn't do anything. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't do homework. I was just there with this amazing pain. And I remember my father came in the door from work, and I was just standing in the kitchen, and I was feeling so ashamed of these feelings. It's just amazing. And it just, I think I did a kind of, I tried to initiate like something, I don't know what, because I didn't talk to my dad in these ways, of course, but my next memory is that I'm sitting on his lap and just crying. I couldn't get the story out, but I didn't need to get the story out. It was just sort of I just felt met. I was just met in that moment, by his patience, by his kindness. And then after that, I reflected on how that lifted that incredible pain, just to be met in this silent in this silent way. So I'm forever appreciative of this lesson from my father, from his reliable kindness, just to show up in the way that he did throughout my life. There's the figure of Kuan Yin in Mahayana Buddhism, and she's considered the embodiment of compassion. She who hears the cries of the world. I really appreciate this too, just as an inspiration, and sometimes in the morning before I sit, I really I allow myself to use my imagination just to connect with something like the cries of the world, and in a detail, like the hog farms where the workers are getting sick and not protected, and the torturous existence of the hogs. Just one simple story that breaks my heart. I can sit and feel strongly motivated that I really care. You know, I want to understand this world. I want to understand this heart and mind. And I want to connect with skill and with compassion. So, as I alluded to a little bit in the guided meditation, I really like this description of mindfulness as receptive. Um, uh, Venerable Analeo, Venerable Analeo sometimes uses the terms the soft embrace of mindfulness. And sometimes he'll describe mindfulness as a she, just in passing, he might say, and yes, and I see she is with me, guiding me. And it has such a protective feeling, like mindfulness as a friend, mindfulness as a protector, and mindfulness as a listener, that is there, wakeful, seeing everything, caring. Yeah, so part of what I'm learning in my own understanding, like what is presence, what is absence, what is mindfulness, what is not, is that mindfulness needs to have in its fabric some aspect of the Brahma Viharas. It needs to have an aspect of friendliness or equanimity and evenness, or compassion when things are difficult. This is in the fabric of mindfulness if it's going to be supportive and if it's going to allow us to open up, and to inquire into our experience, which is sometimes deeply painful. Kittisaro describes in this first chapter his 10-day retreat, one of his first 10-day retreats in Burma. And he says, the only instruction I actually understood, and then he has in parentheses, the Burmese monk couldn't speak English, and I certainly couldn't speak Burmese, was watch your breath, observe the sensations. Then one morning, on about day 4, during a break, I experienced a moment when I was simply present, not looking ahead to the next important or interesting thing. I was simply present. And so I think mindfulness is also nothing special. It's not a mystical, it's not mystical. It's real, and we all know it, and we just need to recognize it. We need to recognize just being established. When we're established right in the center, we know what's happening as it's happening. We're not leaning forward into the next moment, wanting a better moment. We're not falling back in memory, but we're just here and we're awake, and we can recognize that. And there's a connection. There's a connection in that moment, an intimacy in that, even though it's clear, it's simple, but we can take nourishment from that subtle pleasure, that subtle joy that is present when the mind is present and connected, when mindfulness is there. I I was a dancer with a Xenon Dance Company here in the Twin Cities for 10 years, and I always reflect on what incredible training in like what it means to be present and what it means to be absent, when mindfulness is there and when it's not, because there was just a kind of demand in performance, and I was thinking, like in particular joyous moments, like sometimes I would be dancing in unison with the group, in some choreography, but the choreography was not in any way related to the music, which might be weird texture in the back, but we would have to feel each other in this fast moving, dynamic, spatial choreography and be right on the nail together, And it was so I just felt like I just had to have that animal wakefulness where I was hearing, I was seeing, I was feeling all at once, not to miss a beat. And there wasn't an opportunity to, like, if I screwed up or if I did something really well, there wasn't like an opportunity for the mind to say, ooh, that was good, or ooh, that didn't, it was the next moment, the next moment, the next moment. And and whether the performance was great or not great, there was a particular deep pleasure and just that kind of living wakefulness in the moment, that being alive and attuned. Maybe I'll just give one more example of the opposite. I remember a time I was visiting Grand Marais, uh, and just exactly where I wanted to be, hiking in the woods, and I was so aware of the beautiful cedar trees and the softness of the ground, and it struck me as so beautiful. But my mind was so agitated. I could be there just appreciating it for a moment, but my mind was really in the to-do list, really in fears about things that I hadn't done, and I kind of saw this dynamic of, as much as I wanted to arrive here, there was a lot of pressure for the mind to proliferate about other things, and I could see this back and forth, this back and forth. Um, but even the beginnings of seeing this back and forth was really important, like really, really getting to know this dynamic in the mind, you know. Hmm. This is from Kitty Sorrow. He says, when stress, discontent, and suffering arise, we practice turning to it rather than running the other way. This practice is ennobling because we deepen our capacity to be with life as it is. In interrupting our habitual aversion to distress, we discover that we can actually contemplate this experience and recognize the cause of our agitation. Usually we think the cause of suffering is out there. So, coming back to this question, when dukkha ripens, we have a choice, when despair or search, and then what does search look like? And I think this simple wisdom to suddenly redirect our attention inward is one crucial aspect of that search. So we're not blaming what's out there for our unpleasant feeling, for our suffering. That suddenly the whole of the universe is happening in the heart, and it can be understood in the heart. We do what we can in the world. We are skillful. We do our best in the world. But in terms of our own suffering and our own understanding of our hearts, that gaze comes inward. And again, it's a gaze that is like a listening gaze without preconceived ideas of how we should be, of who we should be. It's a fresher looking. That's the kind of investigation. It's fresh, friendly looking. And there are big dukkhas and small dukkhas, big suffering and small suffering. And and I think it's really important to appreciate that, like, the small dukkhas are a great training ground for this turning inward. Just the other day, I was at the grocery store, and while I was kind of at the aisle, getting my food passed along with the cashier, I noticed 2 aisles behind me. There was a woman she was just there for a really long time, a customer, and she just seemed to everything seemed to be complicated with her groceries and her payment, and she just seemed really slow, and she wasn't affecting me in any way. I was doing my thing, but I just noticed a kind of, a judgment, an aversion, a little in my heart came up, like, and I'm walking out the store, and I hear myself, oh yeah, she's just a piece of work, or something like that, and as I leave, I see it's like I can't resist the urge to turn back. Oh, she's still there, So this sort of like and then just seeing this activity of my mind, and it wasn't loud, it wasn't any kind of big suffering. It was just sort of, it was just a tangle in my heart that didn't need to be there. And so there was, like, right away, instead of like, she is somehow a problem, she's not a problem, what is this happening in my heart right now? And so there was just like, which is for me more and more a reinforced and intuitive movement. Just look, man, what's going on, and without judgment. It's like I don't judge at all that came up in my mind, but then I can look, what's that about, and what's the flavor of that little perception that I had about this woman. What kind of what's that about? And I can just see the sort of self-making, oh, I'm not her. I'm this kind of person, not that kind of person, or just the threads of stuff I want to see. I want to know that that's there. And it's like, you know, I could soften, and I could ask them, well, maybe she's having a tough day, and maybe she's having a tough life, and just make that moment, an alchemy. Just change that pattern, or not, just to know, just to see that this is happening. And then and then we get the mechanics. So when things are big, when things feel unmanageable, at least we understand the direction we want to go. Jean Paul Sartre famously said, hell is other people. I just love that, that because we think that. Sometimes we think that, my partner is to blame for how I'm feeling, you know, um, my child, my mother. So the Buddha's first noble truth was that suffering needs to be understood and not bypassed, right? It needs to be understood. And in the Pali word, understood also means to stand under. And I really like this image of standing under dukkha, like a balcony of trees or a sky, like surround. This is dukkha, can't be argued with. This is here, and it needs to be understood. Here's Thanisara, who says, if we rushed the insight of impermanence, of our inherent interconnection, and prematurely bypass our personal difficulties and negative emotions, we become split and disassociated rather than integrated and embodied. Yeah, so this for me, this tendency to bypass, we judge our the kind of states of mind and forces in our heart that we don't like. We tend to judge them, we tend to suppress them. We don't want them, But this idea of, like, we stand under our dukkha, and we come to know it, is really beautiful, and that it can't be circumvented. We need to see through what's happening. And then I just want to address briefly, when suffering is big, when dukkha is big, when there's deep exposure, deep stress in the body, deep stress in the mind, a lot of pain, and just a few ways of listening. And one is to recognize our beautiful intentions, like we want to show up to this, we care about this. And so we can notice this goodness, this part of our hearts that has good intentions around understanding our dukkha, understanding our suffering, whether we're able to or not. We can know that. We can feel our good intentions and be nourished by that. And in the face of overwhelm, I think the body is a reliable place to ground, and I think this image of a friendly listener, to the body is useful here, and yeah, and to kind of realize that the experience of the body is in many ways more subtle than, the hearing and seeing, which are very strong senses, but the wilderness of the body, sensations are subtle. And so it's like just dropping and having a fresh mind to just come into what's feeling, what's moving in the heart, what's moving in the breath, what heat, what weight, just in the language of the body, what's happening, to direct the attention there. And we can investigate the mind, what's the sense of self? What's the view here? Just kind of ask the question in a loving way. I've seen in myself a lot that this quality of investigation can have a voice like a dictator, and it's because I want to cut the suffering out. So I'm investigating, but it's really a ruse. I'm investigating because I want to be so done with this, which isn't, so it's important. Like when I see that, I just want to fix this frickin' thing. I see that, and it's important to know that that's happening. And then I can just switch to, honey, you are in pain, and just open the heart around that, just inviting compassion. And even beneath compassion, it's like sometimes I find I just have to forgive myself. I just have to say, I allow myself to be a learner in life. I allow myself to learn my life's lessons. I don't need to be perfect. I allow myself to make mistakes. I allow myself to be a learner. It's okay. This very home base of deep forgiveness. Thanisara quotes Ajahn Chah in the book. He says, when you can't go up, down, or sideways, then practice really begins. And I'll just end with a paragraph from Thanisara in the second chapter, where she was describing a really difficult day, and there was difficult, charged relationships with her, with her fellow monastics, and this is what she says. And this is when she was at Chithurst in England. She said, I started to locate a ball of fire in my heart center. It was anger, enough anger to heat the whole monastery. There was also desolation, I felt like such a failure at the enlightenment path. All this effort, and I was like a 3-year-old in a tantrum. I don't want to do this! Exclamation point. As I stayed with the emotional pain, I realized the only strategy left was to open to suffering. As the Buddha pointed out, dukkha needs to be understood, not blamed, projected, or even personalized. In that way, I began to see the pain instead of my pain, and in the process saw how we were all struggling in the community. As my understanding deepened, compassion arose for myself and my fellow nuns. And then she adds, we all run from suffering, which may bring temporary relief, but its shadow will follow. Yeah, and I think we have to allow ourselves those moments too when we run. This is we run enough, and then we get weary of running, and that's another story. So I have more here about disenchantment, but I feel like that's enough. Shelley may be gone again next week, and if that's the case, I'll continue with this theme of serene disenchantment. But I'm wondering, with this little bit of time that we have left, if there's questions or things that have come up for you, either in your practice or related to the talk. I'd be happy to respond. I'm just seeing what's here. So this is something, we all know, the suffering of fear and anger and loneliness, and how are we working with it, and what's on the other side. So John is asking, could you repeat the name of the text you have been quoting? Yes, this is a new book. It's called Listening to the Heart, A Contemplative Journey to Engaged Buddhism by Kittisaro and Thanissaro. Yeah, there's a question. I like how you are giving yourself permission to not be perfect. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the meanings of dukkha, we often use the translation of suffering and unsatisfactoriness. But there's one that stuck with me one day, that it's like things are imperfectible. They're imperfectible in their capacity to satisfy. And so I think just like this strange notion of perfection that we carry around, for ourselves, which is it's an egoic view that comes out of craving, really, of wanting, but it's just a wrong view. It's like this idea, of becoming this thing that we think, when I'm this kind of person, I will suddenly be satisfied. We just begin to see that is a deluded idea. We kind of grow out of that delusion of perfection. And also in light, when we practice And we just see the ephemeral nature of all of our experience, moment to moment to moment. It's like in that lack of solidity, ideas, concepts like perfection, they just don't make sense. But we live by that idea, that we think. I used to think, like if I just were better at this, if I were better at that, then I would be lovable, or like these ideas that are again this sort of this reaching outward, this hungry ghost, this kind of reaching away to look for satisfaction out there, and it's not coming to know the heart. So again, it's this fundamental redirecting, this wise attention gazing inward, and then the story begins to shift. Yeah, thank you for the question. Great. So, is anything coming up for anyone else? No. If there's nothing else, maybe I'll just end with a short quote by the Buddha, and then the next time I'm speaking, I'll give this talk on serene disenchantment. I think it deserves a full airing. I don't want to just touch on it and go. So,
Gabe has one question there too.
oh, okay. So Gabe's asking, I like that quote from Ajahn Chah: when you can't go up, down, or sideways, practice begins. Can you speak more about how this can play out? Mm. Yeah, well, and I think this goes back to despair or search. Um, I probably, like many of you, I have felt in those corners of despair, of kind of, yeah, profound suffering, being in a prison of fear, and it's been actually in those moments where it was so overwhelming. And for instance, I can just give an example, like in this sort of um, tendency toward fear in me, and given in one particular circumstance where yeah, the fear just played out in such an astonishing way in my actions, and it was a wake up. And instead of wrestling with the fear, trying to tame the fear in some way, the mind woke up and asked, what is this? What is this? And in a funny way, I realized in that moment that this was so huge. This I didn't create this, like I didn't come into this world wanting to be this fearful person. This is not like, you know, this can't be addressed by my thinking about it and trying to control it. That was the insight. This is so big that this urge to fix and control was so clearly not the avenue. And that's when I started a meditation practice. It was like when Kittisaro said, stop and listen. That was precisely how it was for me. Just stop and listen. And I say this like it's just happened one time, but it's happened many times. Keep relearning the same lesson again and again and again. And that's the turning inward. And we come to know these forces of fear in the heart. We come to know the forces of hatred in the heart, the forces of disconnection. So it's that shift of attention, where we're putting our attention. Thanks, Gabe. Mary asks, when I catch myself having unskillful and unloving judgments of others, like your experience with the woman in the store, I can say to myself what I need is better listening or to stop comparisons. But it can be difficult to really generate the necessary loving kindness to go deeper and not just try to fix it. Yeah, yeah, and part of learning is really allowing things to be there, and seeing like that, those words that came up in my mind, art at the grocery store. I really see them as a force of nature. I really see, oh, conditioned by who knows what. I don't even ask that question, but it's like, oh, I'm so happy that I saw that this was there. So don't feel like that is such a big step, just to see, oh, the judgment is happening, hatred is happening. Just to name it. And just in the naming of it, we get that little bit of space, a little bit of, oh, this is how it is. This is how it is. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, sometimes generating loving kindness, in the moment, that can be tough, especially, if they're in people that we're in complicated relationships with. It's, yeah, yeah. So that's a muscle that can be born, that can be grown, when there's a little distance from that, or in these very small situations, like this one in the grocery store where the stakes are very small. It wasn't hard for me to imagine, like, what if that woman did have a really tough day? Maybe someone, was cruel to her in the morning. Maybe someone died. Maybe, who knows? Who knows? But, it didn't take much at all, just a gentle reflection to shift the heart. But I can't say the same, like that is as easy when, it's with my partner or someone with whom I have a intimate, complicated relationship with. Um, but we can know what's happening. We can be clear of what forces are happening, what's wholesome, what's not wholesome, and without judgment, just know the forces that are alive in this moment. Yeah, thank you, Mary. Mhm. I think I'll end actually, just with this quote by Ajahn Chah, another good one. He says, if you clearly see the truth of these things through meditation practice, then suffering becomes unwound like a screw or a bolt. When a bolt is unscrewed, it withdraws, the mind unwinds in the same way, letting go, withdrawing from the obsession with good and evil, possessions, praise and status, happiness and suffering. If we don't know the truth of these things, it's like tightening the screw all the time. It gets tighter and tighter until it's crushing you and you suffer over everything. When you know how things are, you loosen the screw. In Dhamma language, we call this the arising of, this word, nibbida, or disenchantment. You become weary of things and lay down the fascination with them. If you unwind in this way, you will find peace. So, let's end together. And just sit for a moment, letting go of the words. Just kind of even having the question, what does it mean to listen to myself? Just for a moment. Okay, thank you for being here, everyone, tonight. And please just keep checking the Common Ground calendar, the list of events. There's lots happening all the time on Zoom and on live stream now. So lots of opportunities. Mark will be doing a retreat on Saturday, I believe a half-day retreat on Saturday, and lots more coming up. So great to be with you all. And Shelley may be here next week. And if Shelley isn't able to be here next week, then I'll be here and we can talk about serene disenchantment. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.